Hello, you're watching the Tropics topics of July the 8th, 2018. We still have a lot of Atlantic activity to talk about, and even some from another basin, which we'll get to at the end of the video. But first, let's discuss Beryl, which has actually since degenerated into a remnant low just to the east of the Lesser Antilles, which it was initially forecast to impact as possibly a hurricane. And our last update is not doing so, as it turns out, and it currently has winds at 45 miles an hour with thousands of millibars. It no longer has a close circulation, so it is no longer being, they're no longer going to be advisories on it unless it regenerates, which we will get to in a minute. And then the main topic of discussion today, Tropical Storm Chris, located to the southeast of North Carolina, with winds of 50 miles an hour and a pressure of 1,008 millibars. So let's go ahead and take a look at the wide scheme of things. Here's Beryl down here, barreling, no pun intended, towards the Lesser Antilles, and Chris over here just meandering off the coast of North Carolina. But first, let's get to Beryl, and yeah, she's fallen apart since our last update, and you can see that pretty clearly. It no longer has a really distinct CDO. It's lost its eye feature. It's lost pretty much all of its tropical characteristics, even. You can see really briefly here the low-level center, which does appear to be closed in the satellite loop, but an ASCAP pass from earlier today revealed that this is indeed an open trough full of pressure, but it is just now degenerated into a remnant low, just before it's about to impact. Look like the center is basically the trough axis would go right over the island of Dominica, which was just recently heavily impacted by Hurricane Maria last year. We'll get to that name Maria in just a minute again. But it's going just to be a remnant low, nothing too significant. It's really moving here. The trade winds are very, very fast. If you go back to this, you can see that the forward speed is west-northwest at a really, really fast 26 miles per hour, just because these trades are just screaming in here. So it's likely just to give some really heavy rains to these islands, and maybe some gusty winds, blustery conditions, but apart from that, that really should be it. You can see here that this convection is really being sheared here, because, and you can also see over here that we have some cirrus moving up. That's because we have that trough over the Caribbean that we discussed in the last video, the tropical upper tropospheric trough. That's really taking a toll on the system and will likely not allow it to intensify anymore in the Caribbean. If we look at the National Hurricane Center forecast, we can see it just moves through as a remnant wave into the Caribbean. Will probably move towards Hispaniola, the Dominican Republic, likely by Tuesday, and then could emerge up into the Bahamas, where it could potentially have a chance at regeneration. But again, we'll get into that in a minute when we get to Chris. And speaking of Chris, here he is over here. This is former Tropical Depression 3/Invest 96L that we were discussing in our last video. You can see that it has really gotten itself better organized, though there is the recon went in there earlier today and did find a slight center tilt with height, meaning that one of the vortexes is farther towards the east than the actual center was, just due to the way that the storm has been organizing and the fact that there is a very small, very, very, very small amount of shear. You can see that a little bit here, small amount of easterly shear. You can see that these thunderstorms on the west side kind of get sheared away a little bit towards the east and don't really get a chance to actually really get going. That's why there hasn't really been a whole lot of action along the coast of North Carolina, just a lot of rip current activity, which unfortunately did take the life of one person yesterday who was out on the beaches of North Carolina. So it's already been blamed for one death, unfortunately, and hopefully that will be the last one that comes from the storm. But it's still organizing. It will probably continue to organize throughout the next couple of days, as it probably will meander off the coast of North Carolina for maybe another day or so before it starts to actually kick out and move towards the northeast. Because if we look here at the water vapor shot, we can see here's Chris down here, and here's basically there's two forces really working right now. There's two ridges. Here's this one over here near basically like Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, that's kind of keeping the storm at bay, along with this other ridge down here to the south of Bermuda. You can kind of see that better on the GFS initialization. You can see right here, here's your first ridge right here, kind of moving in this general direction, and here's your other ridge over here, kind of over that general area that I just mentioned. So we have that. So that's why Chris isn't really moving, because it's kind of stuck in between those two ridges. But that will change, because you can see over here this trough moving in over southern Canada, will eventually dip into the northeastern portion of the United States, which will eventually force Chris out of the region and towards the northeast, potentially impacting maritime Canada along the way, but we'll see about that. You can also see here another upper trough trying to form here. This is kind of stealing some of, convective energy from Chris, but not too much, and this will also get kicked out along with Chris when this trough moves in. So kind of just really quickly, just kind of go down like what exactly will happen, just annotate it for you. So here's Chris right here, and ridge here, basically, ridge here, and it's kind of stuck in between. You kind of have this flow right here, and you also have this flow right here, so they're kind of being stuck in the middle of these two flows. So it's not really moving anywhere, and instead it's just kind of just drifting around in this area, just kind of wanderously aiming in this area, which it has been doing for the past 2 days or so. It formed as a tropical depression like right here, and it's only moved like this much ever since then. And here's your other upper low over here, which is in association with this decaying cold front here. That was kind of really what caused this whole stalling motion to really begin, because you have all this dry air up here that's kind of been blocked up here and not really allowing Chris to really get a lot of activity going in this portion of the storm. But in the other portions, it's really, you could see it pretty well. There's a lot of convection. It's pretty healthy looking right now. And that cold front has also been kind of why everything else is not being allowed to move. So this ridge right here isn't really moving until this trough up here actually kind of kicks down and kind of orients itself kind of like this, where by, say, Tuesday, Wednesday, Chris will finally begin to actually kind of kick out of this area. And as it does so, because it's sitting over here in this pretty favorable environment right now, for the most part, shear's probably going to, slacken quite a bit. It's going to move. It's going to be moving basically straight over the Gulf Stream, which kind of sits somewhat kind of like this. So it's going to move basically right over that, which sea surface temperature is about 28, 29 degrees Celsius. Plenty of fuel for, tropical cyclones to really get their act together. So Chris is likely to strengthen, according to National Hurricane Center, to Category 1 hurricane status, I believe by tomorrow. And it's still going to be in this general area when it does so, before it starts to kick out into this area. And as a result, here's the National Hurricane Center forecast showing that it's not really going to move much. Here's Tuesday is still in that general area, but then finally by Tuesday night, Wednesday, it should finally start to kick out. And you can see here, this cone shows that Nova Scotia and Newfoundland are in the cone. Particularly Newfoundland could see possibly a tropical storm landfall, but it might be extratropical regardless. Rainfall, heavy rain, wind, that sort of stuff. The things you normally see with these tropical storms coming up. And if it does hit hurricane strength, then that won't really do much for these places, because it's not likely to retain that status all the way that far north. It'll probably be a tropical storm strength, if it even is still a tropical cyclone by that point. And that would be by Thursday and Friday, so by the end of the week is when maritime Canada is likely to receive their impact from Chris. Along the east coast of the United States, again, just heavy rip currents. Not really too much in the way of really heavy, rainfall, because if you go back to the satellite loop here, you can see it's pretty clear over here. This cold front is really kind of preventing Chris. So this cold front right here, that's just kind of sitting here, it's kind of preventing Chris from just jamming up into North Carolina and causing more significant impacts. That's not going to happen with Chris. So that is some form of good news with this storm. So that's Chris. And one more thing before we go, I just wanted to mention this really quickly, but Typhoon Maria out here in the Western Pacific is an absolute beast of a storm. It's currently a Category 5, I believe, with 140 knot winds. It might be up to 145. I haven't exactly checked. But it doesn't take too big of an imagination to see it. This is an absolute buzzsaw of a typhoon. And for those of you wondering, oh, it's named Maria, what's going on there? Maria was only retired in the Atlantic last season, not in the Western Pacific. This name, Maria, has been used in the Western Pacific since 2000, ever since the most recent naming convention began. And as a result, this storm is being named Maria. It just so happened that this also got to a Category 5 typhoon. And this is going to be, this is going to be a bigger story, especially for folks in Taiwan, Eastern China, the Ryukyu Islands of Japan, pretty much this entire area of East Asia is likely to get a pretty significant impact from Maria. Likely won't be at Category 5 by the time it gets there. It's probably going to weaken quite a bit. But we can still, it's absolutely beautiful on the satellite imagery right now. After really rapidly intensifying, almost eerily similar to Maria last year, into a Cat 5. Then it went through an eye roll placement cycle. We're kind of struggled for the past day and a half, and now it's absolutely blossomed into this beast of a storm. And here's the current JTWC forecast track showing it, yes, with 140 knot winds right now, and going to slowly weaken as it traverses towards the west-northwest through the Ryukyu Islands down towards Taiwan, and then right here this is supposed to be on the 10th, so Tuesday, as a 100 knot typhoon, which is Category 3 equivalent, just to the north of Taiwan. So places such as Taipei might get pretty significant impacts from Maria. As you can see here, it's in the gale force wind quadrant, and might even be closer towards the actual 50 knot quadrant if this actually comes to fruition. So realistically speaking, this might be a Category 3, Category 2 landfall along the eastern coast of China. But then again, this is a very heavily populated area, so it's going to be significant regardless of where it exactly tracks. But there has been a southward trend, but right now it's kind of stabilizing at this general track. So this is probably what's going to end up actually happening with Maria once it actually makes landfall in either China or Taiwan, or really anywhere in, maybe not anywhere in this cone, but anywhere within, say, these kind of red boxes that indicate gale force winds. Anywhere in this area will likely receive some sort of impact from Maria. It could be anything from a landfall, it could be anything from a glancing blow, but we'll just have to see about that. So that is Maria. There's a lot more to talk about with this storm, but this is an Atlantic-based update, so I just wanted to briefly mention this storm right now, and just kind of focusing on the Atlantic. So that's basically it for today. I don't know if I'll be able to provide any more updates regarding Chris or Maria, considering that I will be going on vacation on Tuesday, and we'll probably be kind of out of internet connection for quite a while. So unfortunately, this might be my last update on Chris. But fortunately, Chris not really expected to have too big of an impact on land, and again, Beryl is very likely to just kind of degenerate over time. But again, we might see some sort of regeneration happen near the Bahamas, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. And that really all depends on whether or not Chris can really kick out in time for Beryl to come into this area and possibly pick up some steam, but likely will not regain hurricane strength as it once did. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to stay weather alert.